But it is the referendums that are taking up a huge amount of attention this morning. In part, not just because the government got defeated. It is one thing to get defeated in a referendum. It would be one thing if it was a referendum with an extraordinarily low turnout. But the turnout wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad as these things go. And what they are left with is the single largest referendum defeat in the state's history. The Care referendum being defeated by a vote of 73.9% no. And the third largest referendum defeat in the state's history, that being the family referendum, which was defeated at a 68% no. I tweeted earlier on, if you voted no, why did you vote no? And people have been writing in their reasoning for it, because a lot of people are saying, I wasn't a bit confused. I know exactly why I voted no. I'm a mother, not a carer, and I didn't like the removal of recognising mothers from the Constitution. The reference to the mother is used to ensure women are supported in the home when required, like maintenance payments. I could not in good faith support the removal of this protection for the most vulnerable in society. I listened to Tom Clonan in the Shannon, and he made an excellent case for his son, and I could not in good faith go against him. And I'm angry at the use of NGOs to support government policy, particularly the National Women's Council of Ireland. They do not represent me. They represent rich, middle, upper class women who have continually let women down. Well, in a couple of minutes, one of the former chairpeople of the National Women's Council, that being Frances Fitzgerald, will be with us. But sitting with me in studio is the leader of the only party in the Dáil who called this right, that being Aontú, and the leader being Peadar Tóibín. Peadar, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
To what extent did you read the political tea leaves at the start of all of this and make a wise bet? Or to what extent did you feel passionately about the referendum?
Well, we took a decision on this on the basis of critically analysing the actual content of these proposals. And at the time, to be honest, we were bracing ourselves because we felt we would be against the prevailing political winds. And you know, Aontú was founded on the basis that we have to stand sometimes against the prevailing political winds. So,
and it is worth saying, though, that politically and strategically, that is no bad thing where you need 50-50 balance, because it gives you a lot of access to the airwaves, and it is a useful publicity vehicle as well as being a matter of principle.
Yes, but I will be honest, in this case, it wasn't that decision. In this case, we looked at the amendment on the family, and we saw it as a definition-free amendment that would cause massive confusion, that would see families traipsing through the courts, spending tens of thousands of euros and getting nowhere. And we also looked at the Care amendment, and you know, on the basis that we felt that this would act as a ceiling to families in need of care. And also, we did not want to see the removal of the word mother from the Constitution as well. You know, sometimes I think in this country we have neoliberalism dressed up in progressive clothes. And often,
what does that mean?
Well, what I mean is that sometimes people are just reduced to economic units in terms of this. And do you know what? You know, when you boil down life, it's the relationships that we have with each other are the most important things that we have. And, you know, mothers make an individual, unique contribution to society. And that's really not recognised by a lot of the political establishment at the moment. It's given no financial value at all. And I actually think that we should be able to recognise that, and we should be able to offer some kind of practical supports for mothers who work, you know, in the home now, and outside the home as well.
Tell me when you thought you were onto something, because 2 weeks ago the Sunday Independent did a breakdown of the Ireland Thinks poll, and they have interesting polling this weekend as well, which we will get to. But it had a 66%-ish on both sides yes cohort, which is a fairly overwhelming, commanding lead for one side. Did you think they had that wrong, or did something significant change in the 2 weeks since?
Well, I figured there were two things happening. So we knew that there was a bubble. There's a political bubble in this country at the moment between the political establishment, some of the opposition parties, many of the NGOs, and some elements of the media, present company excluded. But we knew that there was a bubble in that. And sometimes when there's a bubble on an issue, when there's only like a landslide of voices on one side, people are often shy in opinion polls in expressing how they feel. So we saw that there was a growing section of people who were non-decided. And I had an inclination that, well, there could be shy people who just don't want to give the wrong answer to the pollster in that scenario. And that gave us a little bit of hope, actually, that there was an opportunity to reach out to those people, explain what these atrocious amendments actually meant in their real lives, and try to win their views on it. And as well, there's another thing happening in Irish society at the moment. I don't think the political establishment are aware of it. You know, we have that bubble that I talk about often prioritise what I would call the kind of virtue signalling issues over the bread and butter issues. And, you know, it's a thing that happens in the United States of America. The Democrats, for example, We used to be that kind of union between the intellectuals on the coasts and the working class center of America, but they forgot about those working class issues. The Labour Party forgot about the issues of the working class in those northern wall constituencies. Even in Europe, like incredibly, communist parties have lost votes to the Front National. So there's one of the major problems, especially with left-wing parties, is they're forgetting about the bread and butter issues.
Now, talk to me a little bit about this, Paddy, because when obviously this time yesterday morning, I was talking to Barry White and the tally boxes were open and you got a sense of the way that it was going. But across the 24 hours since, we've seen a constituency breakdown and we've had an insight into some of the demographics. They're interesting. I mean, when you look at working class communities, when you look at some of the tallies out of places like Ballyfermot, you had 90% no votes. Then when you look at where the yes went, there was at one stage for the Irish Times had all of Ireland's constituencies in red except Dunleary, which was voting yes. What do you read into the demographic and geographic breakdown that we've learned since yesterday morning?
Yeah, so I do think there's a problem in Irish politics. I think that much of the political establishment is very South Dublin based. And that's no disrespect for people in South Dublin. I know a lot of those people recognise this too. So, for example, in Dublin, Rathdown is a constituency of 4 TDs. All of them are ministers. There are 10 counties on the west coast of Ireland with no ministers there at all. So we have a really unbalanced political representation in this country. And as a result, many of these political parties as well, they have very little grassroots. So when I was young, political parties had commons, membership, which fed information up from the grassroots into those parties. Most of the large political parties have lost those grassroots and are operating now in focus groups and polls to really understand what people are thinking about. And they're losing that connection with people and they're misunderstanding people. I think this is a big problem for the likes of Sinn Féin and the Labour Party and the Soc Dems, especially because working class areas want them to focus on bread and butter issues. They want them to focus on issues such as rents and mortgages and housing and health and education. But these parties are ignoring that to a certain extent. And the danger for those leaderships is that they will become marooned away from their vote base. And that's happened to Sinn Féin on a number of issues now. This is probably the second or third issue where the Sinn Féin leadership is at a distance away now from its natural support base on this. And, logically, parties need to get back and start to talk to people, to listen to people. And that was the big lesson for the government. They're not listening to the people on these issues.
Out of that, 2 things. One is, what did you make of Sinn Féin's? Now, they have resiled from the clarity of it slightly, but they have committed to rerun these referendums, albeit to rerun them with different wording, which, given what you're saying about not being aligned with what their core vote would want, is that politically wise, do you think?
I think that's incredible. And another major misstep by Mary Lou McDonald, because I remember when I was in Sinn Féin, the anger that existed in that party at the time of Lisbon and Nice, etc., when the government basically gave, the Father Ted, go on, you will change your mind on this. I don't think people have any tolerance for that at all anymore. And and it shows a party that's actually not listening to people when they ignore the word of the people.
Second thing is, we're getting messages saying things like Varadkar needs to resign now. Hopefully the government will listen to ordinary people and the basic concerns that they have over health, housing, the over-regulation of everything. And a lot of people saying that kind of thing. How damaging do you think? Now, obviously, you have a dog in the fight because you would hope politically that it would be damaging. But how damaging do you think it is for the government?
Well, I think there's a major problem for the government on this. Okay, so anybody can fight a referendum and anybody can get it wrong. I can understand that. But the government received advice from the Attorney General, which basically says that the issue of durable relationships would not be understood properly by the courts, that there would be no certainty on what the courts would decide what it means. And they said, the Attorney General said to the government that it would increase the level of litigation in terms of immigration, family law, tax, social welfare, etc. Now, Roger O'Gorman and government ministers said that they had never received that information from the Attorney General and actually gave the opposite view. And that's recorded both in the Dáil and in interviews. So the government ministers actually misled the people in relation to this. That is no small thing. This is not like he said, she said in a department or in a committee. This is the Constitution, the most important law of the country. And ministers were...
Although undoubtedly ministers will say that by virtue of the fact that it is Constitution, it is open to a wide range of interpretations, and as ministers they have their rights to interpret in whatever way that they see fit, as long as that's their honestly held belief.
For sure, but I'm quoting here from Roger O'Gorman. He says, no, he's wrong, because the very clear legal advice that we received throughout from the Attorney General is that these items will not be impacted by what we're proposing in the Constitution. And that was in response to a question from Michael McDowell. Would the durable relationships have implications on tax law, social welfare, family law, etc.? So there is no room for wriggling out from the government here. They misled the people on the most important law of the country. And I actually think that I don't have confidence in Minister Roger O'Gorman as a result of that.
Who do you blame in the government for having gotten the government into this? Because there's a lot of discussion about, was this Leo doing a solo run? Was this a Green Party desire that the government delivered on? Who's ultimately to blame for starting on this?
I think these referendums were actually a marketing ploy by the government. They were to create a backdrop for the upcoming year of elections. They wanted to tap into some of the positivity that they received from the marriage referendum and the repeal referendum. And they felt that this would be another opportunity to go in with those progressive credentials, etc., into an election. And I actually think that they spent 23 million euros as an election backdrop on that purpose, to be honest. And I actually think that they got their ears clipped significantly by the Irish people in relation to this, because if they were to listen to the Irish people, they would realise at this stage that the tolerance for this type of virtue signalling has reduced significantly in this country.
Peadar, I greatly appreciate your time coming in, because undoubtedly there will be a lot of requests on your time this morning. Peadar, though, being the leader of Aontú, again, the only political party in the Dáil to have been on the right side of the way that this vote ultimately went. After the break, we will be getting a bit of an analysis from Gary Murphy, the Professor of Politics at DCU, Francis Fitzgerald, retiring FG MEP for Dublin, and Anna Marie McHugh, Assistant Managing Director of the National Ploughing Association.